article. November was my fantasy reading month. I read two children's books, Skellig by David Almond and On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness by Andrew Peterson. A short story, A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince by J.K. Rowling, and Titus Groan by Mervyn Peake. I will tell you about all of them except A Midsummer Night's Dream. I made a video all about it and I talked about the lover's eyes, a few characteristics of love, and Athens and the wood. I won't repeat myself here. The first book is Skellig by David Almond, an author from the northeast of England where I live. A boy, Michael, and his family just moved into their new house and his baby sister was born at the beginning of the story. However, the house was barely inhabitable, having been occupied by a lonely old man until he died, without anyone noticing for days. There was a toilet in the corner of the dining room, there was a jungle in the back garden, there was a garage barely standing up, and his baby sister was born with a heart problem and kept going in and out of the hospital with their mum. So although Michael's parents were both alive and well and they lived together, they were both occupied. The mum with the baby, the dad with the house. I find it interesting, a lot of my favorite young protagonists don't have parents or don't have full access to their parents. For example, Harry Potter, Anne of Green Gables, and A Little Princess. Anyway, while Michael was neglected, he discovered a half-dead man with wings called Skellig in their garage. And this is what I find incredible. Probably because I'm not a child anymore and I can't think like a child anymore. So instead of calling the police or telling his parents, Michael hid the fact that Skellig was in their garage and sneaked back again and again to befriend him. So under the appearance of a homeless man or a highly unusual creature, Michael instinctively recognized something special about him. So instead of something to be alarmed at or to be got rid of, Michael reached out and cared for him. Another major event was that Michael met a girl called Mina on his new street. Mina was a bit too fierce for me. She seemed a bit friendless, although unlike Michael, she had a very close relationship with her mum. So Michael and Mina became friends and Michael shared the secret of Skellig with her. I think the story is about friendship between children and how children see and understand those who are different from themselves. And that links nicely to our second title, A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings, a short story by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It was brought to my attention with perfect timing via a book. I probably have talked about this book way too often recently, How to Read Literature Like a Professor by Thomas C. Foster. He talks about it in a chapter on characters who have wings, who fly with or without wings, and who fall from the sky. Foster says there are not many of them, and this very old man with enormous wings is one of the examples he gives. And I thought immediately, I know a character who has wings, aka Skellig, and I was just about to start reading that story. However, A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings makes a lot more sense than Skellig in terms of the overall message, partly because Professor Foster gives an amazing interpretation of this amazing short story, and partly because David Almond, the author of Skellig, wasn't sure where the story was going while he was writing. He said so in an article on his website. So if the author didn't know where the story was going, could the story have a coherent message to it? I'm not sure. I guess so, but I'm not sure. Back to A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings, the storyline has a lot in common with Skellig. A couple one day found a very old man with enormous wings half dead in their backyard, and they also had a sick baby. I'd believe it if this old man and Skellig were the same angel, bird, man, creature. However, the rest of the story, how people responded to them, were the very opposite. So the rest of the story can be summarized as, will you recognize an angel if the angel is completely different to your expectation? I said it in my planning video that this would be my third attempt reading On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness, and I have finished it this time. I think it's a trust issue. I didn't trust the author Andrew Peterson as a writer, so I questioned his characters, the settings and the story. But so many friends have said that they enjoyed it, their children enjoyed it, and it was a lovely story. So I trusted the author this time and I finished it without much trouble. It's about the very ordinary Igby children living with their mother and grandfather in an enemy-occupied country and how they got caught up in a series of unexpected events and ended up somewhere extraordinary that they wouldn't have imagined possible at the beginning. I loved the last few chapters best, where things got a bit more exciting. On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness is really just the beginning of their grand adventure, and I guess they will slowly become who they are supposed to be in the following books. I had the same feeling at the end of the Dune film. The first episode really is just to set the scene and to prepare us for the grand adventure, the real adventure in the following episodes, which is slightly unsatisfying. I know this is a book video, but the one thing that stood out to me most from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince was actually from the film adaptation. When Professor Slughorn told Harry about his mother's gift, a lily petal turning into a wee fish, he said it was beautiful magic, wondrous to behold. I don't think that line is in the original text, and I don't know which genius added it into the film, but I love that line. I love that magic is described as beautiful. When the struggle between the good and the evil is the main focus of the storyline, to be able to do clever or powerful magic seem to matter more most of the time, rightly so. But in this instance, what Lily did was not powerful, not even useful, it was beautiful. And somehow that stuck with me more than any other spells in the story. Titus Groan is the first book in the Gormenghast series by Mervyn Peake. We, as in the world, have 3 books in this series. We've got Titus Groan, Gormenghast and Titus Alone. So it's often called the Gormenghast trilogy. But at least 2 other books, Titus Awake and Gormenghast Revisited, were planned, but Peake died before he could write much more. Titus Groan is the least active title character I had so far this year. It's funny how the novel is called Titus Groan because he is a newborn baby and he just gets wrapped in cloth and carried around most of the time. So in that sense, the story is not about him. But in another sense, the story is all about him. First of all, the story kicks off because Titus was born. Titus is the next Lord Groan, the 77th Earl of Gormenghast. So the novel opens with the celebration of this newborn heir. It's a natural cause for much celebration and joy. However, the spectacles in the servants' quarters are not natural, out of proportion and sickening. Out of the orgy and the endless maze of this Gothic castle comes a young man called Steerpike. The actions of the novel are mostly about how Steerpike makes use of everybody ruthlessly and raises himself up from nobody to praise and power. Since the day Titus was born, everything happens for the worse because of Steerpike. There's plotting, manipulation, deceit, murder, mysterious disappearance, and death. That keyword summary makes it sound like any other generic historical drama that involves a throne and a succession situation. But the novel is certainly not a generic historical drama. The writing style makes it impossible to think of it that way. But even if we just stick to the storyline, I think the plotting and the murder are on the surface level. There might be more to it than meets the eye. I don't mean there are bigger or more evil plots hidden behind. Quite the opposite. And that's the second reason I think the story is all about the baby Titus. Through him, I feel like good is going to come out of all the disasters in the following books. In that respect, Titus Groan is like on the edge of the dark sea of darkness. The author definitely has multiple books in mind, and each book is not quite a standalone story. There is definitely a climax towards the end of Titus Groan, but there isn't a conclusion. It mostly introduces the characters and sets the scene. We can't quite tell yet how Titus is going to make the difference or where the story is going. If we can't tell, why do I say good might come out of evil? I think it's in that climax scene and how the author uses weather and imagery from biblical stories to construct that sense of hope. I will talk about that amazing climax scene in a separate video because I have so much to say. The last reason I believe that the novel is about the baby Titus is, after all, the author named the novel after him. It's quite unusual for the title character to be newborn at the beginning of the story and age 1 by the end. I had to trust the author that ultimately the story is about him even when I can't quite see the connection. One interesting feature of the book is its collection of unconventional characters. Their face and figure are ugly and character-like. I've never read a book with so many odd-looking and odd-behaving people in it. The author seems to emphasize one or two aspects of their personality, so their behaviors are extremely consistent and predictable to the extent of absurdity. Reading the novel sometimes feels like walking in a Victorian madhouse, even though I've never been to a Victorian madhouse. Another feature of the story is the role that nature plays. There's a lot of description of the natural environment of the castle, of the weather, how the sun rises and sets when a person roams the wilderness alone, or how the air and the night sky change when a young man tries to stay warm outdoors, or how it rains and thunders on a night of murder. It's very much in the tradition of Thomas Hardy. If he knew, I think the old master would have been very proud of Mervyn Peake. Those are the books I read in November. My potential titles for December are pretty scattered. There is no one unifying theme to them because there are 3 things I'd like to do. The first thing I want to do is to read More Flanders by Daniel Defoe. 2022 marks the 300-year anniversary of its publication, and this is the last chance I could read it before it's 2023. I read a lot of Christmas stories from different countries and different historical periods last December, and there were 2 that I couldn't fit in. The Penguin Book of Christmas Stories and the Nutcracker. I'd like to read those. The third thing is to reread a few books that have fascinated me this year but didn't get enough attention or time from me because I was always rushing. So I'd like to reread 3 books and add them to my reading journal playlist. These 3 titles are not just excellent, they are highly unusual as well. A Journal of the Plague Year reads like an eyewitness account of someone who lived through and survived London's terrible plague in 1665, but it's actually fictional. The story of the Napoleon of Notting Hill happens in future London, but people think and behave as if it's the medieval time. The last one is Titus Groan, and especially the climax scene. I want to give them a bit more love and attention and share them with you. As always, this is a potential list. I don't promise to read all of them. If you'd like more Christmassy book recommendations, I read a lot more of those last December. I'll link the wrap-up video here. Among that stack, I highly recommend the medieval poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight translated by Simon Armitage, and the short story The Night Before Christmas by Nikolai Gogol, two of my favorites from last year. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. I will see you in my next one.